so much everyone to be here before Thanksgiving. So take the tradition of Thanksgiving. There's so much things I would be thankful for too. The one thing I was really amazed by the Chicago art and culture scene is there's so many passion and so many elders and younger people in the field to take up a responsibility, to start to work and start to organize and to start to mark the spot, to carry our community forward. When I started to get involved with this space, have been thinking about what heritage is supposed to mean. And I had a conversation with Phillip, and actually Phillip helped me to articulate the idea of heritage through the action of inherent. The action of being inherent comes with this responsibility you take on, but the action of inherent also you help this thing and this culture to keep alive. And only to keep it alive, to leave this chance and opportunity for it to grow and to become something new. And to connect it to the younger generation, potential for the future. So there's actually a connection between the heritage and the future through us. We are the bridge to make that happen. Which I have been observed in this space. Please, we will have a time to do a tour after our conversation, and please check out our gift shops. We have some items today here. These amazing things coming from China before the Communist Civil War, because after that there is a ban was put, the sanction was put onto items from that particular region. These are at least 70, 80 years old, before China being industrialized. Many of this stuff carry this tradition of the handcraft stuff, and which is showcased in our gift shop. Please check out that after. The other lens I have been thinking about is this is the year of dragon. And if you're thinking about this, which showcased it here, dragon as this mythical creature, as a combination of different animals and special abilities from different animals, which I have seen in Chicago as an immigrant experience. People brought in very different cultural perspectives, but also able to working together in the same space. And it is the dragon from different animal special ability to collaborate and to creating some cohesive, to find this consistent platform and to achieve this mystical and magical power through this collaboration. So I think, thinking about the election, thinking about the states of the city, the states, I think it is so urgent, but also so pressing for us to sit together to think about what is our heritage, how we think about heritage, what to preserve and how to preserve, and think about our future. Is there a collective future to us? Thank everyone to be here today. So I think we're going to start with introducing ourselves, and Larry Lee, which is an amazing curator artist in Chicago, who organized this Asian American artist group called Goddamn.
You're giving me way too much credit. No. No, I mean, I'm part of it, but the credit goes to Gregory Bay, who passed away 3 years ago. And I was fortunate to be in his orbit, and there have been other of my fellow colleagues who have taken up the mantle, including Maggie Wong, James Cow, and even fellow faculty members like Adrian Wong, and even Jin Lee. But no, I am not Goddamn.
I mean, that's how I introduced you to Goddamn, which is now, I really love the phrase.
Yes. It's not what you think it is. Yeah.
And also, I want to point out this whole conversation will be recorded by Chicago Dance History Projects, and eventually the conversation will be collected in Newberry libraries. So maybe people in 100 years can hear what we're talking about today. Mm-hmm. And Michael and Sean are from the Chicago Dance History Projects, and feel free to talk with them. I think your project's also really anchoring the heritage and the responsibility we're going to address today. So Larry, please carry on.
Thank you, G. Again, I think I know most of you. I just introduced myself to at least 3 of you. But I'm Larry Lee, and I am a native son, as most of you probably are too, or daughter of the city of Chicago, with just a bit of a detour through, I know, South Carolina. But it is my privilege and honor to moderate this panel on something that I think is very important to who we are and what we do. This notion of heritage through our cultural institutions of color that, as G said, is especially relevant, given the current sign of the times. So I am a multimedia artist, curator, writer through the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, Columbia College, and DePaul University. My work likes to look at who I am, so it's somewhat autobiographical in trying to navigate my Asian heritage and what G hinted and alluded at here in the Americas, in Western society. So with that, I'm going to move on over because I know Shireen and I.
Okay. So I too think I know maybe half the people in this room. We've met at some time or other. So my name is Shireen Ahmad, and along with Afzal, I'm one of the founders of the South Asia Institute. So I guess tell you a little bit about myself. So I professionally, I had really nothing to do with art other than the fact that I was a collector and a lover of art of South Asia. Professionally, I was, and I say was for an important reason, I was a physician, I was an academic. I taught anesthesiology at Northwestern University for 45 years. But I lived in Chicago for almost more than 50 years now. But did not grow up exposed to to visual art, although the arts is a big part of our culture and our community. Growing up I grew up in Pakistan, but the big interest in visual art came really after migrating to this country. When you get your first small apartment and you think about what you're going to put on the walls, what's going to bring you pleasure, what you're going to enjoy. And we did not understand American art. We certainly couldn't afford good American art as poor residents. But we were very fortunate in one of our early trips to visit the homeland. We ended up meeting an artist who was a mentor, a very, very well-known artist. And in that, at that time, there were no galleries, there were no auctions, or certainly not South Asian art auctions. So really our early acquisitions were from artists themselves, who became really good friends and educated us and created this interest. And then, your home gets a little larger, your collection grows a little larger, Eventually, when there was more works in storage than on our walls, we began to think, there was something happening here and that we really needed to share these works. And that's when we also began to realize how underrepresented and maybe even misrepresented our South Asian art is. And then it was not just only the visual arts as we began to think about this, it was the arts in general, it was other genres too that were really not adequately represented, and that's really what led us to think about doing something about it. Maybe we were unrealistic, thinking that two people, they say one person can't make a change, maybe two people can, but that's kind of like what led us to think about and put together the South Asia Institute.
Well, I will fill in some of the gaps that she covered already. Basically, she's a physician, she was a physician, I was a physician, and we basically worked very hard, and we bought a lot of art, and time came when about, say, 10 years ago, as to what do we do with the art that we have collected. The most common avenue for passing it on to another generation is to give it to a university or give it to a museum and let them run with it because they're expert at it. But I think I was very unhappy about that trajectory because, they give you one exhibition, they exhibit your work once, and after that it goes into the basement. And I said, this is not us. We got to constantly interact with our work that we bought, we liked, and some of it is good, some of it is not good, but again, it was what we liked. So that was our collection. So we thought about taking the narrative in our hands and not only tell the narrative of the two-dimensional art, because we collected basically two-dimensional. And along with that, we thought long and hard as to, what should we do beside displaying our treasures. And, we looked around, and people really don't know what us brown people are, or us South Asians are, or for matter, any Asians are in this country. The narrative that is set for us, we are supposed to be a very highly motivated personalities or motivated individuals, and we are called silent majority for a reason, in the sense that, we work hard, we don't complain, we go about our business, and that's the reason why the silent majority comes in. And very achieving, a very highly achievable kind of a goal we set ourselves. And we never complain, we never ask for help, so I think this was something that was set up by the non-Asians' prerogative as to what Asians are. And we wanted to break that ceiling, or that display of other people's thought what our story should be. We should be non-complaining, we should take it what comes to you, and you just go on with it. And I think that also results in misusing us also. And also, in the sense that, there's a reverse discrimination against us. And I think we wanted to break that reverse discrimination, either in the educational field or any kind of occupational field also. So that's where we looked around and we looked at telling our stories in our words and our viewpoints, and let all the misconceptions that have crept up to try to break that, and to actually have a seat on the table like we are sitting, so that we can make some kind of a decision as to what we should do. And that's where our South Asian Institute was born. Thank you.
Well, no.
I'm so interested in what you both have been saying, because my name is Lenore Metrick-Chen, and I am an art and cultural historian. And so I'm an emeritus professor, and most of my research, since even in grad school, I didn't notice it at the time, but it has been about identity and cultural history. My first paper in grad school was on Auschwitz photos, and why do we look at Auschwitz photos? Now, I'm Jewish, and so it might seem, well, she would do Jewish heritage. I had to do so much research to understand what was supposed to be my heritage. So it does make me think, what is the difference between my heritage and anyone else's heritage when I have to learn it over a gap? And my next paper was African art, politics, and abstract expressionism. And that's because for my thesis, I was writing about abstract expressionism because I didn't understand it. And I thought, what is this about? And as I started my research, I realized the abstract expressionists talked about African art. And just what you were saying, the misunderstanding gave rise to a whole different perception and tradition. They felt that African art masks expressed fear in the face of nature when they were expressing, for instance, a god staring into eternity, no fear at all. And so there was all this overlap that was a misconstruction. But I just completed an edited volume, and it's called, I'm bad at names, even my own. It's called Locations of Cultural Memory. Memorial, monuments, architecture, and other ephemera. And at this point in my life, I was very interested in how do we pass on cultural memory. And if you make a monument, the next generation doesn't know how to read that monument. We have all these allegorical monuments, and we don't know allegory anymore. So we've lost the connection to our storage of cultural memory. Other authors in the collected volume are from different cultures and different countries, and the trajectory of the volume is, it starts with stone monuments and shows how inadequate they are for storing memory, and moves to an artist like Gordon Matta Clark, who deconstructed buildings, and the deconstruction was the way to contain memory. And it looks at a German building that was used for the Nazi purposes, then as an art museum, which is then for the Allies, and then as an art museum, and how it carries its heritage with it. But you can ignore it, and you can see it. And so heritage is so much also about erasure. What are we choosing to carry into the present? Heritage is a choice, and it's a construction. And so when you were talking about what can your heritage mean, and the museums weren't adequate to say what you want, it's because, to me, we're saying different things in the present and using the past to help us think about what we want in the future, similar to what G was saying. So I see that you are really thinking about what the future legacy should be. And even that is problematic because it's always a matter of the viewer and who's interpreting. And so I'm fascinated by the idea of heritage because it's like 99% desire and 1% fact, you know. So I think that gives you an idea of where I'm coming from, and I'll stop here.
It's your turn, Phil.
It's a lot to think about. A phrase comes to mind about heritage. Is it a moral code or is it an ethical kind of response? That's so some of the things I'm thinking from what you're saying. But I'm Phillip Chen, and I am a professor until June. I'm a professor of fine art at Drake University with an emphasis on drawing and print media. A lot of my artwork has had to do with historical subjects, and a subset of those works that I'm especially interested in and want to focus more on has to do with family history, because I was raised by people who were of the Chinese exclusion era. I'm the son of a paper son. My father was a paper son. They were silent and secretive and furtive, and my father had 2 birthdays and several names, and we grew up with all kinds of conjectural stories about their lives, but they were quite ghostly to us. These people that are called my closest relatives, my parents, my aunts, my uncles, they were very enigmatic. And I've given a lot of attention in more recent years to trying to fill in some of the gaps through historical research, particularly since I've been able to get immigration files through the Department of Justice, through the Freedom of Information Act. And I've learned a lot about the particular details of their lives. And I've made images about them, and I've put them in exhibitions. I've made sure they've been published. I've made sure they've been addressed by other writers in a critical sense. That's my main task right now, is to forward the stories of these people that have been effaced. They're laborers. My family's history is one of literally, my great-grandfather was a gold miner in California in the 1850s, a coolie. Laundry workers, restaurant workers, that's my family history. And if I'm not sure what's going to happen, is this the time to look at visuals?
You can.
The average guy on the street in the United States might know that the Chinese helped to build the railroads, but you will not find a single photographic document that shows the face of a Chinese worker. They were deliberately effaced. This is the one stereo view that I found that shows Chinese workers at the joining of the 2 branches in 1869 at Promontory Point. You can tell who the Chinese are by what they're wearing. They're driving the final spike, but their faces are turned from the camera. The other famous view of the spiking of those 2 rails together in 1869 ceremonially, there is a Chinese man in that photo, but a white man is holding his hat deliberately in front of that worker's face, blocking the view of the lens. So, okay, can we move forward? I recently found these portraits of Chinese railroad workers. These were men that worked on the Central Pacific Railroad. These are the first faces I have seen of the men that worked on the railroads, the Central Pacific Railroad. Now, I need to research this more. I don't know who they are. They were taken in California. They were taken in 1868 to 9. We know that by the mount that's on the photo, the color of the framing. When you measure photographs with a micrometer, you can date cards according to their thickness. The format, the color, the square corners, the thickness of the mount dates these to 1868, 1869. These are the railroad workers of the Central Pacific Railroad, and we get to see their faces. Now, I have a responsibility to do something with these. I've always shared our collections. I think that's important to say right now. We have vast holdings of historical information, of documentation. I make sure that I lend to authors. We never charge. We lend to authors freely. We've lent to documentarians like Rick Burns, museums like the New York Historical Society. I mean,
Jack Chen.
Jack Chen in New York, right? NYU, the Asia Pacific America, APA, and yeah, so that's very important. And these, once I know more about these will be released to the public domain. My research is really, I feel compelled to do what I do because I grew up in a restaurant. I was that kid in the back table doing his homework and then shelling teapots. I was that kid. I'm very, very interested in the history of Chinese American labor. I think it's a history that a lot of people are not interested in, but it's important. These are the people I love. These are the people that deserve to have their stories told and preserved and forwarded. And then I don't know what follows this. I make artwork about the things that I learned. This is a work called Flower Water. It's basically a synopsis of the history of labor in my family, terminating left to right in that teapot, the most public aspect of. Oh, and what is that form? It's a woman's hoop skirt from the Victorian era. My father's identity papers coming into the United States as an illegal, pretending to be somebody he isn't, assumed identity, false name, false history, false everything. And then what's after that? I'm sorry. Yeah, there it is. That's his paper father. That's my paper grandfather on the left, Chan Woot. Some of you are familiar with the Orange Garden restaurant on the north side, right? He's the founder of the Orange Garden restaurant, Chan Woot. And that's his purported son, my father. And go forward. And this is a print I made about my father. He was a waiter at the Jade Cafe. He was a waiter who served the gangster John Dillinger in a private booth. He was John Dillinger's waiter at the Jade Cafe in 1934. And I always wondered what that was like. What would it have been like to? So anyway, this is called My Father and Dillinger. It's an abstract portrait of my father through the subconsciousness of John Dillinger under general anesthesia. So the dictionary definition of abstraction is a separation or a distancing from any instance or thing. So this is an abstract portrait of my father, who, as I said, I hardly knew. And I think that's a great impetus in my research, is to kind of know who these people were. And I know so much more about them now that they're long gone, which is unfortunate. My favorite uncle, Chen Yoksu, he lived in Chinatown his entire life. Professional gambler, hitman. He was the hatchet man for the Chen Family Association during the Tong Wars. He ran into a lot of trouble, of course, as you can see. He smuggled in the United States. He's the only one of my uncles who was not inspected by an immigration officer. He was not inspected because he didn't go through Angel Island, or he didn't go through detention. He smuggled across the Canadian border. But they caught up with him and he confessed. And that's what this is about. But that's my favorite uncle, and when I found out at his funeral that he had been a hatchet man, I had a lot of reconciliation to go through. So I made a print called Evergreen, and I'm sorry it's so dark, it's actually not that dark. Everything in this print he handed to me, he gave to me. I received material culture from him over years, one thing after another after another. And I think he knew that I was going to be a steward. I don't know how he knew that, but he was a very intuitive guy. And so he would hand me things. So I do feel a responsibility to make something of it. He made, there's his hatchet, there's his skull pipe. I'm not showing the firearms he gave me, it's a little too upsetting. He would give me firearms and cases of ammo when I was a little boy. He made these enchanting little pieces of furniture for children. And this is the guy who was a hatchet man. So right now, I'm in conversation with Dr. Charles Bethea at the Chicago History Museum, who's the head of curation and exhibitions. And we've agreed to do an exhibition about my uncle's duality. We will show the firearms, his brass knuckles, that's what that is, and all the enchanting children's furniture side by side. Dr. Bethea is still in the process of figuring out how to frame the story. He doesn't want it to be a stereotype. He doesn't want it to be, you know, the hatchet man story, right? So they're being very responsible, and they'll figure it out. But there will be an exhibition about Chen Yuk-sui at the Chicago History Museum in probably the next 2 years. And you know, this is something that I'm working on actively all the time. How do I get this stuff known to people who can do something with it? I don't have the ability to do that. Curators and educators, others do. And so I'm trying to make that happen.
No, it's a very interesting story that you're telling.
Thank you.
It needs to be explored in
Yeah, I mean,
different angles.
Chinese folk art.
Yeah,
What the hell? Like, nobody else has stuff like this.
no.
But I've always had for better or worse, I've always had the instinct to hang on to things. You know? And I don't know why, I just accumulate stuff. And in all these decades, they've been things that no one's been interested in. But culturally, something is happening.
Right.
There is a growing interest. And I'm so glad I hung on to these things. You know? So,
People want to connect with their past,
yeah. Yeah.
and I think we should all do.
Well, and just to interrupt for a moment, I think also because previously heritage has always been something, when it's public, it's been handed down from those in power. And so it's been the heritage of people who are in power and are the elite people. And instead of being people whose lives are not so prominent and not featured in general history, I think that now we're getting interested, like you were saying, in Southeast Asian art and in arts and lives that aren't top down, but other people are beginning to find ways to express it. Media is different, and accessibility. So I think we're living at a time where your family history can really interest a lot of people. Fill in those blanks between what the powers said our heritage was and how we have lived our heritage.
Yeah.
And also seem not like naturally happen. I think it's, you know, through the community's long-term push to like to make your voice heard.
Yeah, it's a very idiosyncratic, the things that he made and how he did it. You know, there's a unique, sentient, autonomous being there. You can see it. There's a personality there.
Yeah.
He's not a waiter. He's not a hitman. He's not a gambler. He's Chen Yuk-sui, you know? He's this guy that had an emotional life in addition to all that. And how he's perceived. He had a kind of private emotional life.
But that's what's important about us telling our own stories. You know, you telling your own cultural story rather than having somebody on the outside.
All of these
which
things
is
were
what
made for
often
children.
happens.
These were all made for children, and he loved children. He adored us, and we felt it. And then you find out he was a killer, right? So the working title for the print called Evergreen was thank you to the Buddhists, There is no contradiction.
Mhm.
That was the working title for that print.
You know, I think in the olden days, people who were in control of the media, you know, brought the stories along, and those are the stories that we've heard. But common stories like your self-story and our story, you've never been heard, and this is what we are bringing forward for people.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what we do at the South Asia Institute, though, is through a number, you know, the various genres of art, because, like we were talking, you know, every one of the arts is underrepresented. In our in the South Asian community, a lot of people know about dance. There's a lot of dance schools because dance was part of their, it was part of the religious practice. So girls were taught to dance, you know, at a very young age. And so you have immigrants coming over to the United States, and they want their children to learn to dance. So there's a lot of people know about the dance, know about Bharatnatyam, and especially Bharatnatyam. Maybe not the other dance forms. So again, you know, the underrepresentation. Thank you. So this is so what we've tried to do is to promote all of the arts, and you will find when you look at some of the things that we do, we have well-known figures there that we feature, but there's a whole slew of young upcoming artists who don't have a platform, who don't get to be represented, and that's at South Asia Institute. We give them an opportunity for that. And so there's a number of different types of events that we have. These are some of the panel discussions and symposiums that we've had, and you'll recognize some of the names there, and then some of them don't. On the bottom there, we're really proud of our recent exhibition, Seen and Unseen, and this one documented 150 years of exhibitions of South Asian artists here in Chicago. You know, going back to the Columbian Exposition, people had no idea that there was an Indian pavilion. There were artists being shown, and curators who really influenced what we're seeing in the museums now.
Yeah, I remember Jalat
Yeah.
doing that wonderful show for the old Walsh Gallery,
Yes.
based on one of the Swami speeches 100
Right.
years later. That
Right.
was fantastic.
And the Walsh Gallery is no longer, even though Julie Walsh is still around, but she was one of the folks who actually played a big role in some of the South Asian artists, and Southeast Asian as well,
Yes, lots.
who made it to mainstream museums. We can look at the next one there. And this is, we have a lot of music. Music features a lot, and you'll see here, there's people like Gaurav Mazumdar and so on who are, you know, was Ravi Shankar's student. But then there's a lot of local artists that we featured. And last year, tied in with our exhibition, which was about indigo, we had a series that connected with the blues history in Chicago. And so you'll see a lot of local musicians here who also came and performed. And so some really big names, but also some lesser known, more music. A lot of music really connects people, and we have I would say maybe 60% of our audience is South Asian, but 60%, 40% are just your regular Chicagoan. And so that's something that really gives us a lot of pleasure to see how we're able to bring all these diverse communities together. I can go to the next one. Some dance, but performance art, and our queer community is also participants of a lot of our programming, and children. We've felt it's really important to involve our younger generation, and so we have programs where we specifically targeted for younger, for the younger age group. Some more films and performers and some local artists. And we also have educational initiatives at South Asia Institute. We have a lot of, every year we probably have 6 to 8 interns who will go through the institute. And we've also have a space on our 3rd floor where we have student exhibitions. So upcoming students from all local institutions. This was the first one by the students of the School of the Art Institute.
Make sure everyone visits South Asia Institute. It's an amazing space.
Yeah, and we'll have another student exhibition coming up in the spring. So do come check it out because they have some interesting works there.
In the spirit of performance, maybe it's a good way to transition.
Yeah, I was thinking the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Tatsu, your turn.
To me?
You? We're going to transition.
Oh, okay. Hi.
Great segue.
Okay. Hi. I'm Tatsu Aoki. I'm director of the organization called Asian Improv Arts Midwest. And we're an Asian American performing organization and a presenter, but very much of the Japanese and Japanese American to be the main focus of our organization. But the origin of the Asian Improv Arts came from Bay Area Asian American improvisational music movement in the 80s and 90s. And I transported a portion of that movement into Chicago and made a separate institution here in Chicago. We have 4 departments. One is notoriously Japanese taiko drumming. Secondly, Japanese classical dance department, and the shamisen music, which is the geisha music that I grew up. I was born and raised in Tokyo Geisha House, so that's my geisha music thing. Then we do contemporary that's derived from the traditional arts. So the contemporary means we're the home of Asian American jazz festivals, which is becoming to be the 30th year next year. And we also do the experimental sound, experimental music, and avant-garde, all that. And Larry's been to our space a number of times to do
Your
stuff.
brand new space.
My brand new space, yeah. So we established this, the core body of the institution about 25 years ago in Chicago, kind of coming in from dealing with the Bay Area creative music, Asian American creative music, Asian Improv Arts. And when we made this institution 30 years ago, the word improv did not mean the comedy. When we made it came from the original idea of Asians improvising art. So that was 30 some years ago in the Bay Area, Asian Improv Arts. So I brought the same name into the Asian Improv Arts in Chicago and made the Midwest portion of it. So we're 501c, not for profit like everybody else is. So one of the biggest missions that we have been doing for the last 20 plus years is that, so when we have a community arts on seating level in the world of the art is usually very, very low. So when you talk about community festivals, especially ethnic folk arts festival, that is not really in the same level of the position in the arts and the music. So we try to bring up, uplift our capacity of the community endeavor, and with the professional artists to bring it into a place. So we brought our American Japanese community taiko drumming into jazz festivals and blues festivals, museums, So kind of get themselves out of the community events only. So big success on our Shukai, which is a Japanese classical dance department. We have been working for the last 20 years to bring them into the scene in Chicago, the dance scene, rather than the community festival scene. And we've been really, really extremely successful to bring in this ethnic folk arts into the art. And I think it's something really related to what you said in the beginning about the position of the ethnic folk arts that is not really satisfactory and not only misrepresented because we haven't been represented, so miss part is not even there. Right? So missing part. So it's completely, so if you look at the performing arts spectrum, just in Chicago, the ethnic folk arts, Asian American arts only have a very, very small portion in the entire performing arts. So we're trying to develop our capacity to be in the same level as the others, mainstream people. So that's what we have been doing for the last many years ago, many years, and we just opened up a new space on Elston Avenue, and we have small performing space and where we do all of our training classes and artist talks. And that is one of
the last two images
there, right?
Where is that on, excuse me, where on Elston Avenue?
4875 North Elston. Yeah, it's
By
right
Seafood
in
City.
between, yeah, yes, right by Seafood City. That's right. So if you go,
I know all the eating spots, sorry.
So there's a Filipino supermarket with a giant supermarket with a seafood and everything. We're just about 4 blocks away from that, and we have been doing a lot of artist talks and small presentations, and of course our weekly training session for the taiko drumming and dance and the shamisen music, and rehearsal for the contemporary music is taking place. And some of these pictures are there.
You also have a project on Asian American archiving,
Yes.
Asian American art archives
Yes.
too. You want to talk a little bit about
That would be something that maybe Alex is doing.
Oh, okay.
But
Yeah.
what we have been doing for the archive part is that the mainstream institutions have Chicago music archives, and a lot of the Asian American music were excluded from the history of that. So we are working with the other institution to kind of excavate all the past recordings and documentation of the Chicago music and putting this Asian American music into part of the Chicago music scene. And it's very similar to lots of other people's issues that how we were excluded from the history. And because basically we don't exist in Chicago music. We started the campaign probably about 15 years ago to starting to put our stuff into the history part of the music.
What's interesting to me is that because you want to be more seen and have your tradition not be just for the few people who know it, you take it out of being some sort of fetishizing of the past, and you make it be more, but where can we place this? How can it grow in the future? And so that's what's so fascinating about heritage, because if you just fetishize it, it stays as a snapshot of the past, and you're using it to become an active participant. And I think that's the whole thing about heritage, is it's really not a noun, it's not an object, it's not something that you can take hold of, but it's a process of taking what you know from the past and utilizing it. And it seems like you're doing such a wonderful thing, because you're keeping the tradition and showing how it can grow, and not only grow as an art form, but that the community becomes a larger community. And that's sort of what I'm always interested in is because everyone, Phillip, looking at their own traditions, and for me it's like, well, how did you decide what the borders were for your tradition, especially in this age where there's so much diaspora and everything is fragmented? So it gives other people a chance to participate in something that locally wouldn't have been their tradition, but maybe psychologically or heartfelt, it feels like home to them. And so these traditions are passing into larger groups, different groups, and yours is such a great example of that.
Yeah, we kind of believe that the tradition and to keep up the heritage is to protect the core aesthetics. And the core aesthetics is like a food. So our food culture survives because people eat. Your restaurant changes, your table changes, your dishes changes, but the core aesthetics stays the same. So if we protect the core aesthetics in the proper way into our community and just keep it going with that, I think we could have a different venue, if not us. But there's somebody else is going to take that aesthetics and being able to keep our drumming, being able to keep our dancing, being able to keep our contemporary Asian American practices.
We saw a group, just accidentally, called Miyumi.
Yes, that's my group.
Yes. And
Did
it
you
was
see us at the Hyde Park Jazz Festival?
no, we saw you at Grinnell
Oh, Grinnell? Okay. Right,
with
Grinnell College.
Jeremy
Yes,
Chen's
right,
exhibition.
right.
That was amazing.
That was an eye-opener.
Oh, thank
And
you.
I feel so stupid. Where have I been living under a rock? I never knew such music existed.
The Miyumi project has been going in Chicago as a improvising Asian American, African American fusion
Yes.
for about last 30
Yes.
years.
Yes.
And it's very similar to Funkadesi because Raul and I are good friends.
Yes.
And the Funkadesi and the Miyumi project kind of started around the same time.
Yes.
In a very interestingly, one is in Southeast Asian diaspora, East Asian diaspora. We've been doing a lot of things together.
Yeah.
It's very interesting that you say that. Our motto these days is we bring the South Asian culture to life.
Right.
So that's what we're doing. We are basically regenerating or re-exploring the way to express the South Asian culture
Right.
that has been dormant for a long time.
Right.
And we are finding out, especially from one of our executive directors, who is a white guy, but he has so much experience in drumming business, tabla, and all those kind of things, that he says, if you cut me, I'll bleed brown. Because he's so immersed into it. And he's come up with the terms that there is a blues music that is for South Asian. It's a blue music, but brown in nature. So but it's called blue.
That's so interesting because I think one of the issue with everybody else that we have on the table is how to beat the validation process. Because we always have to battle that we needed to be validated by the mainstream society most of the time to be on the stage, be on the festival, be on the roster of the grants. This validation process is very systemic issues that we have. And so we need our guys, our peers, to be in that position. So my organization and my artists, the associated artists, we try to encourage them to be in a place where they can make a decision making. And we're not far from that, but maybe a little bit more to go for the next two, 3 decades.
Well, it gets at this other thing too, that kind of paradox that heritage is conservative by nature because you are conserving the past, the tradition. But it's also a strategy of resistance when it comes from the ground up. And I think that's what you're talking about too, that you resist that other culture that wants to efface everything else. And what you're doing, finding that fluidity. That's what I hear from everyone who's talked so far, is, a strategy of resistance.
Perhaps we can introduce Sara.
Thank you. My name is Sara Zalek, and I founded Buto Chicago kind of by passion and accident together. I came here to go to SAIC, School of the Art Institute, in 2003, and I came in as a visual artist, and I had been doing some movement stuff or whatever, different things, but I really thought I was a painter, and I came to the Art Institute and I quickly realized that I had much more to explore and understand, and Buto was introduced to me there as a performance art practice, and there was another colleague who was bringing teachers to Chicago on her own, and so I teamed up with her and we got a space together and we started facilitating more of this kind of work. And then she left to go on and perform other things. And so I just started doing it. I started bringing people from Japan and many Japanese people from Germany as kind of the founder masters of this contemporary art form. It's a very contemporary, started in the 50s, late 50s, early 60s. And so it became very hybrid because it went everywhere, all over the world, through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and now. So there's a really interesting, for me, talking about heritage is so interesting because yes, I am a white person, come from Minnesota, Swedish ancestry. There's nothing Asian about me, except for my father went to Japan when I was 9 several times on business, and so I think I did have the aesthetic introduced to me at some point. But it was really the training that, it was more than the aesthetic. It was the deep practice just felt very much like, oh, this is a way I can go forward. And then continued to just bring people here, and then I did a festival. So the idea was that I had a teacher who was coming, and I wanted a lot of people to be there for it. And so I was like, how do I had a marketing background, so I got a website, and that's where all the information lived. And then a bunch of my contemporary friends and other people I was interested in seeing what their work was like. We had already been doing Buto classes for several years, and so some of these younger voices really wanted to perform and be paid to perform and be professional. And so I started Buto festivals, like a 2-day festival, brought several teachers who had free workshops, and yeah, it became the following year, the same thing happened. I brought another teacher, and so every year I started bringing 2 to 3 teachers a year, really out, like not in an academic setting as far as like I didn't have an institutional backing, it was just me getting the information out there. And so then 2017, I had a whole month-long festival that went in several places all around the city, because that was the other thing I realized, that Chicago is very decentralized, and so the first 2 festivals were at the Chicago Cultural Center in the dance studio, if anyone's been there. Beautiful space. And we had a space in Wicker Park called Outer Space where we had all our workshops. That's Hiroko Tamano. The Tamanos immigrated to San Francisco in the 70s and have been teaching Buto there since then. And still, yeah, Hiroko still teaches to this day. In fact, she does weekly online classes. She's 81 years old, online. You can take her class. And she still curates performances at a small studio in San Francisco as well. And so, yeah, it was just, people really came out for this, and they kept coming. And so I kept, the interest was there, and it's just been a labor of love. Queer community is very represented, very diverse community. I just keep pulling people that I really know need their voices heard, and they do need to be seen and heard and experiment and try things, and to be also professional, and they want to be professional artists, performing artists. This was 2015. G actually has been a photographer for many of my events. And I did just, Tadashi Endo was at your space, performed at the on the No stage. He was very happy to be there. And so outer space was a space that was like it was a jumping off point for us, but now we don't have that space since 2020. And so we've been collaborating a lot with other organizations to be able to get floor space, get performance space so that people can keep sharing their voices in this way. I'd be curious if anyone knows about Buto here or has experienced Buto art before at the table. It's a very fringe, I mean, it's even fringe for the Japanese arts in a way. A lot of the Japanese Buto artists have moved away from Japan, but it is having another moment, a revival in Japan, I think now, and there are contemporary Buto
came
dancers.
when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
So my contemporary avant-garde experimental performance and the Buto dancers are very close. Also, what you see, taiko drumming, the Japanese ensemble taiko drumming was reinvented tradition, kind of like a Korean samanori music. So it's really coming from the same era of late 1950s to 60s to 70s.
Taiko drumming.
Yeah, taiko.
Yeah.
But I mean, original taiko drumming is older. That's just as much as Buto's origin is, dance is much older.
Yes.
But so I think the lineage is still there. I mean, it's a contemporary traditional art.
That's what's so interesting because it does have so many threads from the past that also then push it out in different ways into the future. That's why when we're talking about this heritage being a living thing, I feel that very
But
much.
I think Buto dance is honest tradition because a lot of taiko drumming drummers, they cheat because because you can actually play the role on the ancient Asian tradition by playing the taiko drum, which it is, right? It came from the Buddhist practice and all this stuff, but the ensemble taiko is reinvented tradition from 1950s on, so you can't really claim that as the 1,000 years of tradition. The origin is, but the taiko drumming, ensemble drumming is contemporary Asian practices. So then admission has to be. I always be a party pooper about this. When they talk about the taiko drumming, and they say, well, but the ensemble drumming is a new tradition. And there's nothing wrong with the contemporary practices. So, let's just admit that. Geisha music, I can talk about 400 years. Shubukai, our classical dance department, we can talk about 400, 500 years, but ensemble taiko, the same as a Buto dance.
Yeah, it really was like trying to be against all the things that were coming from. It was trying to be against no theater, against contemporary buyo dance, and also it was and trying to incorporate other cultural, like German expressionism, for instance. I mean, Hijikata, it's famous, he went to see Mary Wigman and learned from her and then went back to Japan. So he was always also very much taking from different things. So it's a very interesting how it also, moves through different types of bodies. I mean, to see a Japanese artist do their version of Buto and a European artist and an American artist, it's very different things you're looking at. But somehow it gets put into this category, which I also find to be very interesting around heritage, is how do I, as a white person, carry that heritage? And I feel that I create containers for also many people to flow through. That's my thinking. Yeah. Also, my great-grandfather was a gold rush guy and went through the same area.
I see them together.
And they were like 18 years. He was just supposedly traveling, in California and then
Do you know about where?
He went through Seattle and up through a pass in Alaska that I should remember, but I cannot.
So interesting.
But yeah, and I've been learning more about him, yeah, great-grandfather, but yeah, this is an
That's
interesting, it was maybe my fascination for going west also.
And one just, you know, the idea of embodiment is so important to me to thinking about heritage, because even when you pass along a tradition like drumming and so on, the body that's doing the drumming, you know, like you said, it's going to change over time. The people, even nutrition can change how the drum is held and who's drumming on it. So we think that we're passing along the same thing, but it always has to morph. It always has to change. And I think that's not paid attention to enough, that what was done so many years ago for a different context, for a different reason, parts of it, elements are alive today, but the context is gone. There's so much that has changed. So it's what you said about the core too. There's some core things, but yeah, it's very different. And I guess I see my life as being, you know, your answers questioned. I'm always questioning like the conclusions that people have come to, because even the idea of tradition and heritage, if you feel like you have a certain heritage, well, do your siblings share that feeling? Do they came from the same place, the same people, but you might be the one like Phillip is, his siblings don't care about storehousing and remembering. Likewise, a Caucasian person can come in and care more about South Asian heritage and bleed brown. So it's not a simple thing. Heritage
No,
is very
it's not a
complex.
natural thing. It's not automatic. It's relational. It's a value system.
Yeah.
It's elective, you know. If I didn't choose the history of Chinese American laborers to focus on and to forward, it could have been the history of social political satire in print media, you know. But I elected to do something else because my heartstrings, you know, the tug was more emotionally powerful there. But my brother and sister have no knowledge of and don't want to know anything historical about Chinese Americans, where they come from. They don't want to know. You know, we have dinner together and I start talking about, hey, you know, we're the product of the Taiping Rebellion and the Opium Wars, and they're like, you know what I mean? It's just, yeah. You know, in many ways, I'm closer to other people. You know, I'm closer to people than my own blood relatives, and many of them are dead. You know, it's like other artists, you know, like Daumier or Goya or, you know, Kathy Kolowitz, or, you know, right? I mean, those are my relatives. Those are the people I'm connected to. They're not my blood relatives, you know.
Yeah, I would say I feel that familial kind of connection when I'm working with artists.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in the basest way of saying it, I mean, heritage has not to do with blood.
Yeah.
Mario, you're...
I'm happy to join the conversation. Basically, I'm so humbled to be sitting at this table with all of you. It's a really emotionally activating table, so I'm like regulating my nervous system as I'm listening. So my name is Marianne. I work in programs at the Abrahamic Center for Cultural Education. We were created and exist to foster the exploration and preservation of Islamic heritage and culture. Simultaneously, we have a lot of community initiatives that focus on tending to our community and also advancing cultural competency around Islam and Muslims. For me personally, academia has not ushered me into the realm of this work, nor has academia awarded me many medals of honor. However, I think my life has. in the prompt for this discussion, there was a question of what is something that you inherited. And I was really sitting with that question, and I think for me, I inherited the understanding that everything is transient. My mother, in raising both me and my sister, really punctuated the abstract understanding that life is very fragile and reminded us of the fleeting nature of material possessions. My grandparents' home was partially destroyed due to a climate disaster, and they were not provided support or aid to rehabilitate that, so we were really just left with spoken word and memories, and very few salvaged objects that spoke to our history and our family history. And so I think that inheritance really punctuates my work in that I carry this urgency almost as if I'm perpetually in flight or fight mode, to think about preserving and caring for heritage. And I think our space focuses a lot also on curriculum creation, and we really seek to destabilize this hierarchy of who holds heritage and who can speak on heritage. So we work a lot with Chicago Public Schools and work intimately with children to activate their tongue and their mind and think about how they can restore, store, and preserve their own heritage, because ultimately everyone is involved. So we really are thinking about the sustainability of heritage also. So that's just a little bit about our space. I won't take up too much time.
What is it that you teach, or what part of heritage?
Yeah, so we have a permanent exhibition in our space that is titled The Timeline of the Prophets. So it explores the interconnected figures, prophets, concepts between the Abrahamic traditions of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. But a lot of our work is hosting independent, unique events that foster Islamic heritage. So we might have an embroidery workshop that tells the story of Palestinian embroidery. We also have a lot of focus on intangible heritage, I would say, more than material culture. So we are more than focused on aesthetic appeal. We try to be responsive to our community's needs. So for example, we will host grief and healing circles. We will have a lot of storytelling sessions. So we are less concerned with wide appeal of having an increased gaze upon us, and instead suturing the wounds of our community and assessing what their needs are.
It's a more internalized process.
Internal and external.
Okay.
So that's a challenge we also have. I think challenges were also mentioned. What is the fine line between exhibitionism and come and look at our space, and how do we also give time to tend to our community's needs, because it's beyond the fetishization.
How do you reach, sorry, I'm just so curious.
That's okay.
How do you reach out to the community, or does the community come in and kind of tell you what they need? Like, what's the rest of the process?
We're always reaching out. We work with other Muslim community organizations. We'll often have youth artists in our space, activating our space. So we are not separate, or we don't place ourselves on a high tier, or we're the spokespeople for all Muslims. Instead, we are an extension, just a small, humble, physical extension of the body. And multiple people can inhabit the body and share this collective responsibility of tending to our space.
So, thank you. Dee?
Yeah, so I'm Dee Liu. I know my last name is hard to pronounce. Yeah, and I'm working here, and I'm the Associate Executive Director at Heritage Museum of Asian Art. And for my personal experience, I born and raised in North China, a very small town, but it's a historical town with a 4,000 years history. So I'm growing up surrounded by the people always talking about heritage and history. I always compare, okay, the same place but different building from different, period. People always compare and talking about that. I think that's the reason I'm always curious about everything. Yeah, so I experienced few different cultures. I live in UK, I live in Europe, and then 3 years ago I moved to United States. So yeah, I'm new here. Yeah, and until let me introduce the museum first.
I'm not sure what you're trying to edit.
It's not your turn. Yeah. Okay, so.
We can guess. No.
Yeah.
Great.
So as you can say, we are a collection-based museum. So we have a collections spanning 5,000 years. So when I started working here, I feel like home. Yeah, so our collections including from different Asian cultures. Most of them is from China, but still have some from Japan, Korea, and religions are from South Asia and more. And yeah, so I want to highlight our mission. So our mission is to preserve and promote Asian art traditions for the current or future generations. So what we're doing now is try to attract the new generation come to the heritage, So we started using TikTok. So yes, for our history, yeah, we founded in 2014 a small a storefront in Chinatown. I think lots of people familiar about that. And we grew up fast. For 2 years, we expanded to 18,000 square feet solo building, independent building, still in Chinatown. But unfortunately, 2020, there's people called COVID-19, so we closed for 2 years. Until October 2022, we relocate here, as a rental place. And also in October, after we reopening, that's still a point for ourselves. We transformed from a collection-based museum to a community engagement museum. We realize it's very important. We are not only so proud of our own culture, we should to introduce them to the people, who are not familiar with that. Yeah, so we start to collaborate with the local Asian artists. Yeah, same with the South Asian Institute. I think we should have a platform to the Asian artists, to them to experience their own culture, and I also want them to inspire by our collections. I think most of the Asian artists in here, maybe they want to look back their own culture and to help create some contemporary art for themselves. Yeah. So we have basically three we have a bi-monthly workshops, and we still have a third Friday museum night. We open late on third Friday. We still have a performance on third Friday, and we still have offer free tours to the public. And we still have start from 2 years ago. We have a API heritage festival. Basically, it's we host the events, workshops, different performance twice a week. That's our Heritage Month every May. Yeah. And this is some example for our workshops. Before we have a mooncake workshops. Yeah, people love food. Food is a really good way to invite people together, experience this culture, why, introduce the history first, and then, jump to the vote. And then of course, we still have a tea ceremony. And also we have a annual Buddhist event. We collaborate with the Tibetan Center. Last year, we invited a Lama to have a Samadala for 3 days. And for this year, we invited a nunnery from India to have a performance to people. And we still have tours, lectures, and artist talk. Calligraphy workshops is really important. Why I put here, because this is our most popular workshop here. And people always like to write some really good words to bring back, give it to the friends or family.
I was thinking about how you frame this as through community spaces and also into the traditional practice spaces. I think one of the challenges, maybe the Heritage Museum are trying to do, I'm so sorry, on the ground. My hair is popping out. It's trying to find a good balance of that, right? I love how you frame this through the form is the same we carry, but how people interpret it and through different add-ons to the forms are how to keep it alive and how to keep it relevant.
And I think the common denominator is really of the next generation, looking at younger audience, those who might be away from home, right? Who grew up connected to what their parents, grandparents have told them about by way of reminiscing. That sometimes is romanticization, sometimes could be corrective, right? And then this whole notion of making a living, keeping it alive, that also talks about geography, right? Being not of that place physically, right, but still feel drawn, and all those kind of connections, from Philip's wonderful story that I just couldn't help but think about. I don't remember the author, but Eric Larson. Right, what Devil in the White City, that the schizophrenia of a mass murderer who, is preying upon people, but I'm not calling your favorite uncle, mass murderer, but those kind of weird dualities that seem, I think, so apparent when, and maybe really the underlying factor of how we're drawn to heritage, right? That kind of, in this case, we've kind of heard bridging these gaps and these distances, to reconnect. I love how Myron, you were saying, ours is this process for people to heal and to educate about things that, such in my case, I don't want to be lost, right? I don't want it to be this game of hide and seek, half the time. I know that a major conversation that this seems to want to buttress against is this notion of cultural amnesia that's at play, especially when I'm reading, through our journals now of this constant battle to maybe reinvent what could be Asian and Asian American, arts, including different kind of music, musical performative genres too. That I'm interested to hear more from you about. that I think is the impetus for, this roundtable. I mean, I loved hearing the stories, but it seems like it's, we're hoping that we can generate, and it seems like that, a nice critical mass, that will allow for collaborations and different kind of opportunities to, again, maybe allow outside communities to know and share in our voices too. The visions, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you mentioned a couple of really important points there. I think we all of us sitting here are, well, every single one of us here in the U.S. are immigrants, right? The only native immigrant is our true American Indian. But I think we all bring with us our heritage, right? But we also take on the culture of our new found home. And I think we want to preserve certain aspects of the heritage that we bring with us, because that kind of informs our lives, our children's lives, going forward.
It also adds to it too.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. Our experiences here. But I think the other thing that another reason why we want to share our heritage is because there is so much misunderstanding about who we really are. I don't think we should be shy about talking about the degree of South Asian hatred that's still, or Asian hatred, right? I'm so used to talking about my South Asian heritage, but Asian hatred is still here after generations of us being here. And why is that? And I think some of it is our own not communicating enough about our heritage. Because there's so much that we have in common here. What separates us is so little. Our differences are so little. And so yes, your idea of collaboration is even more important for us to be able to point out. And to point out to our non-South Asians how much we have in common with them as well. And these next 4 years, that's even going to be even more important. If we're all going to survive the next 4 years, it's going to be really, we have to stick together.
Well, we will survive next 4 years.
Yes. Oh, my goodness.
But, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to honor that point. I think it's really beautiful, and I think collaboration is important. I also think that sometimes there's the assumption that in order to collaborate and cooperate, we must dilute ourselves. And our community, like the Muslim community, also deals with that a lot. We non-negotiably are a Muslim space, but we're open to all, and we are frequently navigating the dynamics of, do we want to dilute ourselves and our voice to be more palatable to you? And I think there is also some self-care to be done for all of us working in this realm of refusing to do that and remaining very potent, because we can be in harmony as our full selves and not simmer ourselves down. And so I think that is also a part of collaboration. It is not negotiating parts of ourselves, it's creating structures that we can coexist. So if it's a house, perhaps we need 3 different kinds of windows. We need to make it more accessible for everyone, instead of us trying to amputate parts of our body and ourself to fit into something that's already laid out. And I think that that's something that we're thinking about a lot, which also affects our activity level of, well, we won't negotiate this part of our identity, so what now? Yeah.
No, that's, I think, gets at something that's really part of this discussion is the difference between I and we in terms of heritage. And somebody much smarter than myself said that our identity is not singular, and so we live in the first person singular, but we also have various formats of we identity. And I think that this is just what you seem to me
Right.
to be getting at there.
Right.
Who is the we? And you're getting at the idea of the I must exist. Heritage starts, we talked about its embodiment. It starts in the body. And so that's what when you join into a we, how do you define the we? You don't want to lose the I, but I thought it was also interesting because you started off saying, I think you said South Asian, and then you changed it to Asian.
Yeah.
And we're always changing the borders of who we're talking about.
Right.
I'm doing a website now. I live in Iowa, and so when I moved to Iowa, I hear of it as a very white state, so it surprised me how many black people actually live there, especially in Des Moines. And they're, because various relationships that I have in that community, I decided to create this website that's very interactive, and it's called Black Iowa and the Nation, Deconstructing Historical Silence.
Yep.
And so it's, I had to look very deeply at who am I to do a website on Black Iowans. I'm, first of all, not really an Iowan because I moved there. And I'm not black because I had my DNA tested. So, but you know, I take seriously when people say things like black history is American history. Well, what does that mean if it doesn't mean that I can participate and should participate? If I say, no, that's black history and I can't go there, I have something to offer, which is organizational skill or something. The voices on the website are people who have been involved in black history either by birth or interest. And the website functions or will function as a nexus for people who have first-person experiences and for people who are researchers who use that in their research. So it's a really good communal way of meeting. But it is a way to not lose the I and yet expand that we to becoming part of U.S. history, because Iowa Black history is not part of U.S. history at all now. So I love the expanding I. I think that's really important.
The relationship between identity and action. I think it was Mikhail Bakhtin who kind of shined a light on this concept of being hyphen event, you know? And I think that's very important. You know, how do we make things happen, right? I mean, it's not enough to archive and to learn and to.
Right.
We've got to make things happen.
It's an active process rather than a study of something.
Yeah. And we have so much in common. You know, we've done some intercultural events already, and you know about them there, even at South Asia Institute, where you know, a lot of our programming is tied to our exhibitions. And when it was the 75 years of commemorating our 75 years since independence from the British, we had an exhibition at the South Asia Institute where everybody celebrates this independence, right? But it was also a very traumatic time for the region, because we had this partition that was very badly organized, and we had huge numbers of people who died, and it was a very violent time. And that memory still divides the people in that area. It was a division that was based on, they claimed based on religion, but we have not addressed some of those incidents that happened at that time, and that's why it's kind of like a wound that continues to fester. So we had an exhibition that actually made people, it was about the memories of the partition, and it encouraged conversations about it. But for our programming, we collaborated with the Korean museum way up in the suburbs, who also had a partition. And actually that partition was, our artist actually mentioned that in the exhibition. She talked about all the other countries that had gone through similar partitions. We had our musicians who collaborated, and there's always food when we have events, and everybody has dumplings, you know. So, but it was a wonderful event that brought groups of people together that would normally not have interacted with each other. And then the next one that we did the following year was with our Mexican museum right here in Pilsen. And the one thing that many South Asians don't know is that when they first came to the U.S., our South Asians were not accepted by the mainstream Americans, but it was the Mexican community, the other brown community, that took them in, you know, and they married women here. There are still large numbers of South Asian Mexican families living in California, with 2 or 3 generations. And so we had folks in the audience, mixed couples, currently, you know, where one spouse was Mexican and the other South Asian, and you know, again, groups of people that didn't come together, that learned about each other's culture, and then of course there were folks there in the audience who were neither South Asian nor Mexican, who again, and I think it led to a lot of relationships. Some may have persisted. But it's important to understand each other's cultures and share our similarities.
I think it's very interesting. A lot of the East Asian immigrant musicians that came to Chicago, we have so much history with the black musicians. And part of the reason is because we weren't, like even with my generation, we weren't really accepted in North Side white music community. So we basically inevitably go to the black people's music community, and we made a tremendous 40-year plus history in Chicago music ecology of having this Asian American, Japanese American playing with the black people, and it's very similar to that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You say that we made inroads with the black community, and this happened with South Asian too.
Right.
And there are some movements in South Asian music, like South Asian blues, is coming because of the blacks and the South Asian coming together, and they were not allowed to, integrate with the white community. So that was a necessary part of our growth.
And also the jazz history they don't talk about that. So that's another saying that many of the scholars now are doing a lot of researches about the Asian American and African American musicians collaboration, because it was not really written.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You might want to research this. I've learned about a man named Tiny Parnham, orchestra leader, black orchestra leader. He was an RCA Victor recording artist, very popular. And he was the band leader at a Chinese restaurant called the Golden Lily. The restaurant was bombed because Tiny Parnham was hired. A white orchestra was fired. Tiny Parnham was brought in for his popularity, and the place was bombed.
What year?
1929, I think.
Wow, so way before Forbidden City and the whole connection to the Cotton Club, Interesting.
Should we open up to?
Yes, why don't we do that too? I'm sure there's many people here who want to chime in, if not ask questions. Please.
First of all, I really enjoyed listening to all of you and learning about all these different living communities in Chicago that are kind of representing different cultures. But in the mainstream consciousness, I feel like a lot of the way that people learn about culture or like represent different cultures is like in a museum setting, and often like attaching objects as like the like maintaining culture, like being what holds culture rather than like living people. How do you think that, what kind of strategies can there be to like shift that mainstream consciousness of like only objects or only historical things can like hold culture rather than like living people or communities?
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll just jump in. I think it's like exposing young children, our youth and adolescents, to the fact that they too can be involved in heritage preservation without a slew of degrees and without being housed in an institution. And that can start in your living room, orating or collecting oral histories within just your family. That's invaluable and is ephemeral and will live throughout time and is not dependent on material culture. And so I think, again, there's incredible beauty in paying homage to the elders in our community, but I think we underestimate the innovation and capacity to understand of just young people in general. And I think it's great to honor the past, but that continuity needs to be built, and you can do that at your home. Just baseline.
There's some amazing technologies now that where a deceased person can be kind of digitally brought to life and take the stage and stand and speak and actually answer questions from the audience. We saw that at the Holocaust Museum in Skokie. And it was a Holocaust survivor, recently deceased, but I don't know how it's done, but she's inputted with countless numbers of words of her own speaking and writing, and somehow that is, I think, kind of, there seems to be a consciousness. It's amazing. Remember that? It was just incredible. Now, they tell you you can't ask certain kinds of questions, right? But within a range that's given as a guidance, it's like a compass with this person in her own words, and they are her own words.
Yeah, I've been there. That's really amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to counterpart the technology part back to the performing part about the lineage. Is that so one of the things that as much as great technology advances, that new generation had forgotten about being interested in people, because it became an informational world. So this whole telematic communication that we have can do great things, but also as a teacher, I'm beginning to see a lot of the young people forgot to be interested in people. So rather than learning from people or being interested in people, they learn from information.
Right.
And we, the performers, need to reverse this idea, because performing arts is really, really raw, and you can actually see them in front of your eye. And we can create the opportunity for the younger generation people to be interested in us as an artist. So what we do. And that's also very, very important factor of how to keep the lineage, because each of us on the table here, we are the tradition, we are the lineage. As long as we're standing up and speaking and talking to people. So if we can create interesting people out of our community, then the younger generation, the people are going to be interested in our heritage and our history. And so I'm campaigning both technological advancements, because I try to use AI to write something better than that. but I also campaign that just be interested in people, learn stuff from other people rather than the information. And it's something that artists, the performing artists, we're responsible for actually demonstrating that capacity in our society to show younger people that you could be interested in our heritage, right, as a living being.
Oh,
So
go,
I just want to add one thing.
Go ahead.
I also think starting to see the mundane as worthy of preserving. Artifacts don't have to endure an extermination of a whole people to finally become valuable. So just even looking around your home and thinking, what is valuable to me? That's value. It does not have to be encased in a glass wall or a box.
And
And I think that that's really just key. Your home is the museum.
if I can pick up on that, I don't know if you could show the last slide in my thing that I had, but if not, I think what we haven't really talked about is commodification. And I think your question goes right to it, and your answer also, the idea that we think that we're preserving tradition or the past in an object, but the object is mute. So we need to decode it and interpret it. And it's always a matter of whose interpretation are you reading on that little card. And again, that's top-down culture. There was never a single culture that was this museum. These are all incredible objects from the past, from different periods, but not the mundane that you're talking about. So I think part of it is the idea of having it be about the performer and the person takes it away from the commodity of it. And I think museums have relied so much on preserving commodities, like you said, that are from the wealthy class, that we don't really know the history at all. And so I think if you approach a museum with that idea in mind and know what it is that's being presented to you, it's up to the viewer, but I think the museums can do a better job too in suggesting questions rather than acting like they have all the answers, you know.
And I think for so long, a lot of our communities at this table have participated in commodifying as a coping mechanism to be accepted by the broader Western society, and we don't need to do that. We can attribute value to ourselves that's not from the white man, essentially. Like, there's other value to be had.
yeah, but there's also the word culture. I'm going to add another word in front of it, pop. Right? That then maybe centers it in the here and now. Right? That then you can then activate for what everyone is saying here. That pushes how all of a sudden you've inserted yourself into the dialogue. Because it's for me a question of, well, by whose terms, right? And it starts to get you to think about maybe the importance of the education, right? And those inherent systems that control, you know, like how you might hierarchize how you're thinking about culture in that way. That is a basic question here. I mean, luckily we're in the city of Chicago that has the Teach Act, right? You know, that starts to put a little bit of context behind you know, what has been the silent majority, you know, and minority at this point. Yeah, so, you know, that at least makes me hopeful, you know, because that's what we, I think, as educators sometimes call into question. Yeah, you know, got to think about context too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's very interesting that we're talking about museums and all that. You know, when we were looking at formation of our organization, we very selectively used the words that we thought will truly describe us. You know, South Asia, meaning the region that contains so many countries and all that. We have, you know, 95% commonalities. We didn't want to deal with the religion part, the politics part, but we wanted to pay the cultural part. And we particularly used the word institute because we didn't want to use the word museum, because museum looks at the past and it preserves the relics of the past. But institute is a living body that investigates constantly and that's what we need to do.
Yeah, I have a joke that I tell my students.
Yeah, okay.
I don't call it a museum, I call them a must-seum or a mausoleum. Yeah, right. You had a question, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Go ahead.
I did. Thank you so much for all of you sitting here. The work you're doing is just amazing. So I just like with Trump being the president, and I feel like scared that he's going to introduce this nationalistic, one story kind of theme, right? And like personally, I actually grew up in America, and then I moved to China when I was 10. So I was severely bullied in public school in China because of this phrase, 无忘国耻, like never forget national like humiliation. And so I didn't speak Chinese when I first came to China. I was really severely bullied, and it was horrible, but it made me stronger, and now I can speak Chinese fluently. But I think I would love to just hear what are your thoughts about ways to combat, because I have a friend in Minnesota, and she's thinking about switching her kid to homeschool, and I'm an educator, so I teach 5th grade, and I'm just so concerned about how, like, the diversity, the lack of diversity, how as museums, educators, like your work, for example, how can we work with community members to bring in more of this stuff, especially when it's really, really hard. And I thought really long about this, and I was like, what if we did like a subscription box where it would be like, we can come up with stories, but it's digital, kind of like a care package for like COVID, it's free. And kids in like different places, they can open it and there would be menus, recipes, or something like, yeah, like what do you guys think about like ways to cope with this? Yeah.
Yeah, bully the bully.
No, you just have to invent that, that's it. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many resources that I've had to just, like Phil, dig up by myself. I mean, there's the Center for Asian Arts and Media out of, was it the West Coast? Yeah, they're in the West Coast, yeah, CAM. Yeah, and then visual communication is another one. Because CAM used to be NAFTA, right? Yeah. It's, luckily, because of the technology, it's kind of all there. You just have to corral it in and make it digestible, I think, to help. I mean, that's why we kind of exist.
And keep talking about it.
Yeah.
Right,
keep talking about
right.
it. Yeah.
And I think if I was, your age, I think I would.
What, you're not? What?
No, my kids are probably older than her. But I think it's really important for children growing up here in the U.S. It can be hard, but homeschooling is not the answer. They need to be out there socializing with everybody else. They're Asian Americans, and maybe we're fortunate here in Chicago that we have some schools that are really mixed schools and, with great diversity. Probably harder in small town USA. But, and then, some children do get, we have friends who have children who are homeschooled, and then they have a real problem when they get to university, to college and university, and that gets to be a real problem.
I think there's also like labor for us as institutions to do, because it's a beautiful thing to tell parents, make museums your children's classrooms, but not everyone can enter a museum. So I think that weight is on us to bear of how can we creatively think about transportation, or how can we create modules and bring it to you rather than pleading for you to come to us. So I think that's something to critically think about.
And along those lines, I've taught I teach art history and race in the college level for a long time. So I'm trying to think of what would be appropriate for more like grade school children. But if you wanted to see me, we could exchange, because there are some really, like there's 5-minute videos on the web that are so good at unpacking race. And then there's a 3-part series that also is a beautifully done series on race. And also to self-promote, my upcoming website is actually created to kind of exist for that purpose because of the way that race is not being allowed in Iowa schools. And so this is a way to sneak it in. You could go to this website, and then what it has is an archive of, there's already 400 objects on it. And then the students can click and find what objects interest them. And then this hasn't been developed yet, but I'm working with grade school teachers, and there's a exhibition online platform, and so they can make an exhibition and somebody will come and help them kind of find the common thread for the objects that they care about. So there's other things like that, and I think, yeah, get in touch with me, and we'll, I'm sure other people must have websites that they really...
Oh, so many. You have a question?
I'm going to make a comment if it's okay.
Absolutely.
I'm an educator, so first of all, thank you for your courage in speaking up and your honest story. It's extremely important what you shared. I think there's multiple levels to it, and a lot of these great ideas are here. I love the care package idea. However, as someone who's raises kids up and puts them into college, kids fail in college because they don't have the social aspects of the learning, and I heard that greatly covered today, and I really appreciate everyone's honesty about tricky, and I'm not one of you, but meaning artist or anything like that, but I'll say that there's a balance you have to create in learning environments between risk-taking and safety. My humble opinion about the president, is he's dangerous, but we can't hide. I don't care if you're gay and lesbian kids. I don't care if you're Asian, South Asian, Mexican. I work for all Muslim men, by the way. And I've learned a lot about the culture, but I think there's a balance that you have to create between teaching kids. Your own story told us the answer. You made it, you survived, and you speak Chinese, you said, right? Or Japanese?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So I love that. That's the answer. That these are opportunities for you to build your muscle, right, and bridge it out. As an educator myself, coming into education in the 90s, one of the things that I had a problem with was the I became more important than the we. I heard someone mention that. And in fact, we forgot why we teach literature. Underneath the surface of the literature is the theme. The iceberg and the theme. Look at the culture of iceberg, Google it. That's what we're talking about now, and all that's happened is this president has exposed the dark corners of it and not illuminated the light corners, and or provided any opportunity. So I think you should do your own care package, but the care package is to sustain people so they go back into the world and be present. Thanks.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you 100%. I can give you my example. You know, we had 2 boys, and 2 boys went to regularly integrated private school. You know, we wanted them to be interacting with people, you know, as America exists. You know, not as something, artificial boundaries or so. You know, because they'll have to grow up in this country and they have to deal with all kinds of people. So protecting them, you know, the incentive is to protect them, but the idea is to expose them to different ideas rather than protecting them from bad ideas. And my younger son, you know, he's almost 48, 49? Yeah, 48, 49. Yeah. And he was the inclusion director of Sundance Institute. And they wanted to show an Islamophobic film, although he's not religious at all. He doesn't pray or anything like that. But he knew that he is a Muslim and his parents are Muslims, and he just said no to that. He says, you can't have that. But yet, in spite of that, the organization screened that film. And he walked out. He walked out and he said, okay, my 10-year-old kid knows better than what it is. I'm here to try to right the wrong, and here the wrong is being committed and all that.
Yeah.
And fortunately, a lot of doors opened up from his board of directors, a lot of places, a lot of TV stations and all that. And he is, Soros Fellows also. So, as you can see, that, you have to stand your ground, but expose them to all kinds of dangers. Don't protect them.
Yes.
Yes, you have a question?
I just have a question for you.
Me?
Yes.
Yes. Tatsu.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just wondering about, so you're in a music group or a band or?
I do have band as
Yeah.
well as a music group, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Are you, I just wanted to check you guys out. You're on the spot.
Oh, okay.
Just Google him. He's always playing.
Just Google me, Tatsu Aoki, and you'll find me.
All right, great.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think Julian.
Hey, Julian.
I just have, because I mean, this is a beautiful conversation on the panel, but I have one thinking, just because I want to speak out since you're all here. There was a, I'm doing a workshop education also for individually like lecture stuff like that. But unfortunately to cross-cultural study, so because we're talking about heritage, and I meet a lot of more like a lot of people, so they're like that's kind of things like because I understand to I'm fortunate to study like a different culture heritage, and but then for some people I feel like I just want to speak for them because there are some students that they feel like if they study like for example if I come from China, so they study Chinese history like a heritage, but then if they're interested for example for like a Japanese or the South Asian, they want to study about that kind of culture, but they feel like they don't know how to approach. So they feel like exclusive. They don't know how to join that group to study the history, even though interesting to the heritage. So I don't know for like this kind of like museum institution can have some open door for people interested with their heritage, but which they not come from there. So I was just want to bring it up.
I think that speaks to your point right here, right?
Yes.
About being curious, being respectful,
Right.
and also expanding boundaries. God knows my son, who is half Taiwanese, half being. It's like he studied Spanish, but then like he's all things Japanese now, and I think that's more productive. I know, there's always that fine line of cultural appropriation, things like that, but I think it's helpful to study, different cultures. I mean, that's why we love going to international film festivals, right? It's about that exposure that I think helps with the breadth of who we are, right? And God knows it'll make you more tolerant.
Right, I was going to say, it does teach you to appreciate how little the differences are and how much similarity. In the end, we're all one humanity.
That's
right. And there's a very interesting book called Early Indians. And he talks about, we all came out of Africa.
Yeah.
There was just some folks went up north and lost their melanin, and but we're all one humanity, and I think that's what becomes obvious.
It's interesting too, because I love it. I have a question for you because I think are you also talking about the fear of going, I can't think of an example, I think I'm Irish. That if you go in and ask to study a certain group or a part of a culture, and your culture is different, that there's shame in asking about the other culture, that you're giving up your own culture to learn another?
No, without understanding from the younger student who I'm teaching with, like, they're, for example, if they're interested with this group, they're afraid to, okay, if they're, okay, just say if I'm Chinese, they're, or like if they're interested with the Southeastern culture, they want to study, but they're afraid, feel like they're not that group, they cannot study. But I always encourage them.
So, yeah.
But that's what I want to say, because they say, I don't know how to approach with them, or either they have some program to have open to the other diversity that not come from there.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean,
that's
our interns, for example, I mean, we have a very mixed group of interns. Because there is a lack of other South Asian institutions, a lot of the South Asian students end up coming to us, but they're really, it's quite a mixed group.
I thought you wanted to chime in.
I was just going to make a quick comment,
Yeah.
because this is the intersection of a lot of what I do every day. I think in the common discourse, politically especially, we've forgotten the skill set of being good guests, and just how to be a guest with people. So we don't have to be the expert, we don't have to be the scholar, we can just be their guest. And that opens a lot of the conversation to that then becomes a different kind of relationship.
Start with the food.
Okay, Bill, we're going to get into food diplomacy here yet.
No, I just want to comment, I say, because Chicago is very diverse, we have so many culture, especially Asian group with different practice. I just don't know if just one through idea there, just if some have cross-culture study, whatever, more welcome for different people from different grounds, have their own heritage also able to study, to join, learning more things, to share with you.
I think I just want to add, Rebecca's comment was beautiful, learn to be a good guest, but also I think the hesitation the students are experiencing is okay. That's healthy. It's good to have trepidation to enter into someone else's home. I think it's about empowering them to think critically in citing their resources, in giving them authors, in giving them people from that culture to help teach them. But there's no harm in them coming and accessing, but it's just the ethics of doing that cannot be bypassed.
But I also think it's the teacher's responsibility to call around to various places that seem like might be interesting to that particular student, and see how open that place is for cross-cultural discussion. I know, I have done a lot of work on Chinese American history and art, and I went to a NEH group in New York for a month on Asian American art, and everyone but 3 people, including myself, was Asian American. And the first day I was called out, the 3 of us were called out, we know why the rest of you are here, but why are you here? And so the first person who spoke went on and on about how great Asian American culture is, and they seemed satisfied. Then they asked me, and I said, I'm not sure. My husband's Asian American and my children are Asian American, my extended family is. So how am I not, or am I, part of this community? Well, they hated that answer. And so this was the wrong group to be in. Since then, I've never had that exclusionary experience, but as somebody was talking about, you were talking about, that really it made me very, very sensitive. It also made me speak very freely because I figured, and the last day we had this kind of a ceremony at the end, and some of the younger people who were in the group came and hugged me, and it was like they knew that there was this attitude which they couldn't or didn't fight, but they wanted me to know that I was part of their group.
Now you're included, yeah.
And so there's all sorts of things, but I do think there are those exclusionary groups, but if you're wanting your students to have a good experience, do the homework for them. You know?
No, and we're seeing many non-South Asian school groups come through I mean, just yesterday we had a small group that came through, and the teacher came with them.
Mm-hmm.
The one, I know this is a Chicago recording, I'm with Michael, just so you know. Encourage people to pay attention to where they are. In Ohio, I wouldn't be talking quite the same. And so be very, the fear of the next 4 years is the implications of knowing where you are and if you're safe. That's number one. Well, and I'll just speak for you. I've been a gay man out for 30 years. I'm a minority wherever I go.
Yeah.
But wherever I go, it's gay because I'm gay. So I want people to know that. And so when you were talking about culture and identity, what I liked about what you were saying, and you didn't say it this way, but it's what I call the gray margins. Identity is beautiful and heritage is beautiful, but it also has to be checked. My own bias has to be checked first. I have tons of biases. I'm homophobic. People say, how can you be homophobic? So I have to look at my own things before I can welcome and be a guest, which I love that term, to be a guest or a visitor in other people's land, if you will. And I think that's the thing that's going to scare people, because the policies in education, for example, your friend who's worried about schools needing to homeschool is based on some real truthful facts. So there's also that. There's also the implications of not being safe in a school where you're called, and we've seen a little of that in Ohio. I'm sure you've heard a lot of news in the last 6 months. Terrible, terrible heritage and racial and cultural things. So I think you can't be ignorant about where you are and being safe first, or you can't help others. You can't be visible. So thanks for letting me add.
No, that's really important that you pointed that out, because you just have to travel around a little bit in the U.S. and you see the difference.
Yeah.
We are so fortunate here in Chicago. Little town America is like a different country.
It's a different country, exactly.
I think, I would like to say, be brave and be confident, be proud of yourself. That's very important to live in a very diverse community. Yeah. And also, as an Asian museum, if there's a non-Asian come to reach out to us, we are so excited about that. Our culture, because I'm proud of my culture. Right. If someone curious my culture, I was like, okay, let me tell you more. So be brave.
We potentially have one more question.
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Okay, well, kind of related to the elections topic that we were talking about, I just wanted to ask, you said that it was highlighted earlier how we have to stick together in the next 4 years, so maybe just how can we use our art and our work in making sure that our voice will continue to be heard in the next 4 years, and make sure that our arts and culture as an Asian American society will not be misrepresented in the next 4 years.
Well, we will be misrepresented. It's a good thing that we know we will be misrepresented. So that's why we have gone to overcome that.
Right. It's going to make us work twice as hard.
Right.
To get that story out there.
Right.
Are you an artist?
So I am a graduate student.
So I think it's important to recognize who we are and what we are and where we are. Like people say, this is a very difficult time, and our art and our community has been misrepresented for a long time. So if we know this, then we can figure out what to do next.
I think also, as a student or as someone not involved in institutions, holding institutions, especially institutions that represent culture, accountable for how they define and the language they're using, because they might be encased in the reality that they're experts, but you too are the expert and can correct them as needed. So really just it's a collaborative effort.
I think also students don't realize the strength that they have to call out some of these situations when they happen. You as students can say things that sometimes an institution won't be able to say.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's
Especially if they're going to be labeled a terrorist organization.
In the last Trump administration, I found that my artwork started to change. And whereas I had, ever since I was very young, I had always held to the goals of making art that was about possibilities, open, subtlety, reflective. In the last Trump administration, I did the most politically overt imagery that I'd ever done, and it made me feel bad because I always said, you know, don't in literature the saying is don't show, you know, don't tell, show, right? I was like telling. I was telling, and I had a bad conscience about it, but I decided that it really was important to do. So I set aside my old ways of evaluating success in making imagery. And I did go back to it, but I suspect that in the next few years it's going to be more overt messaging again.
Of course. Yeah, I think our artists are the conscience of society.
I also think it's very hard, but when you're in a situation where something is being said or done, even subtle, you take it on the responsibility of calling it out. And a lot of times then you're labeled, you know, and even more. But I think sitting silent makes not only you feel bad, but it allows that to be perpetuated without any conscience. So it's hard.
And just remembering, like, when I came in here, inside this beautiful museum, the abundance of heritage artifacts, I think being mindful when entering museums and remembering that the artifacts too, while fossilized and seemingly dead, are reliant on you to invigorate them. And so I think we are all stakeholders in feeling that responsibility.
But it's such a beautiful note, so we can end on that. When I was thinking about, you mentioned Chicago as a diversity city, but also Chicago is also segregated. And some of, you know, it's the segregation was implied onto the community, but also sometimes it was kind of inflect onto ourselves. We start to self-segregate. And, you know, I think it's a shame for the Republicans to claim what they have their authority to say what American is, but it is also for us to what determine what is American is, because we are all here contributing for hundreds of years from our own culture into this. And also, like, you know, I think from Heather's question, I was thinking about museum as this Western idea and constructed through this as a logical kind of approach. The thing was being preserved in museums are the objects, they are the others, not from the person who is, you know, preserving them. Our next roundtable on December 7th, we include Deborah from the Center for Native to Future. She worked in the Field Museum in the Native American wing first, and the museum's resisting to imagine Native culture can be different. but they're through that anthropological way saying these are have to be this way, these are the native culture. So she left that space to creating an institution, not including those traditions, not saying those are not important, but gave a space for native artists to explore more options. But it's not saying they're removed from their tradition. Many of their painting sculptures inspired by their tradition. Right? So I think I really love how Phillip talking about the idea of heritage is when we inherit, we have the responsibility. And I think everyone, I hope this conversation can inspire all of us to think about what kind of responsibility we can take on and like how to contribute into our own community. But what is I love the way how Lenore is talking about I and we, right? Who are including in the we? And we, as an institution, like as a museum, I think from insiders, we need to take reach out more, right? To creating a bigger platforms, to challenging this kind of traditional idea of how museum was found. And for the community to insert your voice into the big institution. Thank you everyone to join us. Yeah.
One last question. Will you share information about the organization contacts? Because I think the idea of collaboration is important.
Thank you.